Hello, and welcome to our third webinar of the year in our Moving Forward series. I am Lily Cho, Associate Dean of Global and Community Engagement at the Faculty of Liberal Arts and Professional Studies at York University. Thank you so much for joining us. I want to offer a very special welcome to our featured alumnus, Pam Westman, President of Nelvana at Chorus Entertainment. We will be speaking with her shortly. But I also want to welcome all of you. Thank you for being here. I know that it's just been quite a time, and it still matters to me that we can gather like this together in these spaces. And in the spirit of thinking about that gathering and the spaces that we are in and not in, I would like now to acknowledge the land that we are on. This meeting is virtual, and because of that, we are not actually gathered in the same space. York's land acknowledgement might not represent the territory that you are currently on. And if that is the case, I would ask that each of you take the responsibility to acknowledge the traditional territory that you are on and its current treaty holders. I myself am situated in the area known as Takaranto, and so gratefully acknowledge that I live on the same territory as York University. As a member of the York University community, I recognize that many Indigenous nations have long-standing relationships with the territories upon which York University campuses are located that precede the establishment of York University. York acknowledges its presence on the traditional territory of many Indigenous nations. The area known as Takaranto has been taken care by the Anishinaabeg Nation, the Haudenosaunee Confederacy, and the Huron-Wendat. It is now home to many First Nation, Inuit, and Métis communities. We acknowledge the current treaty holders, the Mississaugas of the Credit First Nation. This territory is subject of the Dish with One Spoon Wampum Belt Covenant, an agreement to peaceably share and care for the Great Lakes region. Thank you for being with us again today, and I am just delighted, just completely delighted to welcome again Pam Westman to York University in this virtual sense. You know, Pam, I don't know when the last time you were able to come to the physical York campus might have been. I think it might have changed a bit since you've last been here, and I hope someday that we get to invite you back. But for now, I really do want to offer you a very warm welcome to our virtual space and to all of you for being with us today. During this panel, we will hear from Pam Westman, president of Nelvana, who holds a Bachelor of Commerce degree from LA&PS. She is here today to share her career journey from attending York part-time to becoming a leading female figure in the children's entertainment, programming, and distribution industry. I also want to note that if at any time you need help with this experience or have questions for the panelists about content, feel free to click on the Q&A button on the bottom of your screen. We have an amazing team of people ready to help you. And now, once again, I would very much like to extend a warm welcome to Pam Westman. Hi, Pam. It's so wonderful to have you here with us.
Hello, Lily. Thank you so much. I'm so excited to be here, and I'm so honored to speak on behalf of York University as one of the alumni and very proud graduate.
It's just, you know, we're so thrilled to have you in the room. So I'm just, you know, vibrating with excitement. And I do think a lot about the journey you've taken, but also this extraordinary moment that you've been navigating, and the kind of ways in which you have led through the last year and a half and much before that. You and I talked previously about how the pandemic has impacted the content that Nelvana is delivering to your audiences. And I actually have to pause here and note that, you know, I watched a lot of Peppa Pig for quite a while, so I feel very connected to the work you were doing. I have a little girl at home. And so I think a lot about the dynamic that is so interesting in terms of how you have connected so closely with so many people in their homes during, you know, what has been a very extraordinary time. And so I wonder if you could tell us a little bit about how our changing view of the world impacts the content that Nelvana distributes.
Yes, I think we've all watched a lot more TV than we ever have. And the one thing I've heard from parents of young children is that their restrictions on screen time have gone out the window over the last year and a half, mostly because a lot of their schooling has been done in front of a screen, as well as a lot of the entertainment as we have remained at home. And at Nelvana, for those of you who don't know, Nelvana is a major animation studio, Canadian animation studio. We're celebrating our 50th anniversary. So I would say one of the oldest, and you probably know us from Franklin and Max and Ruby. Your students grew up with those shows. When we look at our new content, we produce about 5 or 6 series a year. When the pandemic started, we decided to not put masks and social distancing into our content for a couple of reasons. First, animation takes a very long time. So a series is about a year and a half to 2 years. And we didn't know what the future would look like in 2020, in the spring of 2020. So we decided not to do that. We also decided that it was a very scary time for kids and families. And if we had determined to put masks and social distancing and viruses and washing hands and not touching people into content that lives for 10 and 20 years, it would very much date that content, but also the world would look very different as we move forward in time. So what we did instead is we made some shorts. For example, our live action show, Miss Persona, which if you are a 1 or 2-year-old is a very popular show. We did a PSA on YouTube to help explain what the virus was in case kids were scared about what they were hearing, about going to the doctor and people getting sick, and just trying to help children, very, very young children, understand at their level what was going on. We also created an animated short, Toon Bops, which is more of a musical, sort of fun little 90-second short, and incorporated a song called Superheroes and Washing Hands that kids were singing at school as teachers were trying to get children to understand how important it was to grab their masks and wash their hands. And so we made a little animated short. So we decided that was what we would do in terms of incorporating this very different time and sometimes a very scary time for young children into our content, but leave our long form content very much the same as it always had been. Where we did find the big difference in our industry was in distribution. And this is when we sell our content worldwide to all of the different content carriers like the Netflix and the Amazons and the Treehouses and the YTVs of the world. And what we did find is that COVID, as you mentioned, you've watched a lot of TV, and that was very similar across the world. And therefore, the new streaming platforms that were getting ready to launch and had been scheduled to launch in 2020 and 2021, and we were all thinking, it's too many. There's 6, 7, 8 of them launching. Nobody's going to pay that much and for that many streamers in their homes. We found that COVID meant people did continue to pay for their cable subscription and Netflix and Amazon because they like their packages getting delivered, and Disney Plus because that was such a huge brand. And now layer in Apple TV, Paramount Plus, all of those different Discovery Plus for the HGTV type shows, all of those different platforms that are launching and have launched over the last 12 to 18 months are doing very well because people do value that content in their homes. And so the appetite has grown substantially, which for us content creators is very good news.
Well, it's so interesting, and I know that I have so many other questions for you, but I actually want to stay with your answer here for a second and just ask a couple of questions because part of what you're drawing our attention to, and I use the word attention, for a reason, is that we hear a lot about the attention economy, and we hear about it as if it was a limited resource, as if there was only so much to go around. But it seems to me that part of what you're marking is that there is a sort of profound connection between attention and our desire for relations, a sense of community, and that part of what what you were doing, in terms of the content you were putting together, was to give that sense of community and connection. And when I think about my childhood, I just think about how durable that sense of watching those shows were. The things that you watch as a kid really do stay with you. And I know sometimes people are very critical of that, but I don't feel damaged. Like and I don't, I think it was quite important to have taken part in that experience and have had those shared viewing experiences, even though they're fragmented differently now in terms of temporality and streaming. It still seems to me that when I hear you about the screen time, but at the same time, I wouldn't want my daughter to go to school and not be able to talk to her friends about things that they found delight in, and there's delight in all kinds of things, but the kind of work you do is part of that. So it's I think that's really important, the way you've been so careful and conscious about what that means. Um, for families, and especially for little ones who have been so isolated, and who, they don't have the kinds of things that we have. Like they don't text their friends. They're not on big Facebook groups. I hope not.
Right.
Right. So, what part of what you're doing is some of that. And I think that's, I don't know, I just wanted to just note that for a minute, because I think it's really important what you've done.
It is.
And
And I found
yeah.
in the kids business, the majority, if not all of the people that I have met in business take the responsibility of talking to children very seriously. It is
Yeah.
much more than dollars and cents what we do. When we make
Yeah.
content for children, we know that we have to be, first of all, accepted by the parent. They usually are the gatekeeper to some degree, but that we also influence and teach and entertain very young minds. And
Mhm.
so teaching things like socio-emotional skills, kindness, self-awareness, critical thinking are just as important as ABCs and one, two, threes. And so to your point, we've all grown up with content. Some of us in books. I mean, I am still very influenced by the books I read as a young child, as well as the content that I watched, as well as the feature films that my parents took me to. They're all content, and good content lasts. And when you find
Mhm.
something that children are our audience, and while parents may not love and cannot sit around for hours on end and watch the same content over and over again, if they see positive things with their child in terms of watching that content, then that's what's important. A parent just wants their child to be happy, and that's what kids content does.
Yeah, I just connect with that quite deeply, because the other thing that I think your PSAs did, and the shorts, is, I think that as a parent during this time, it was very scary, but you didn't want to project that fear, into your home and onto your children. Um, and part of what those public service announcements that you did gave parents, or people like me anyway, was a language for talking about really hard things, at a speed and at a level that made sense to our little ones. And I think that sensitivity, I'm a literature prof, so I don't have any problem with language. I can talk your ear off any day.
Yeah.
But in fact, I'm not that, like, I have to think a lot about what it means to talk to a little person. Like,
Right.
it's not the same. It's not the same, and I don't have the tools for it usually. Like, I do need a little help, and so I know that you made these shorts for children, but I think, maybe, I don't know if you knew this, but I think it also was very important for the grown-ups in the lives of those children, because we all needed language for talking about things that were beyond our experience, that were, scary, that we didn't want to make scary. I think that that's really important. So thank you for that. And I just want to actually note then that part of what, when you're talking, what you're drawing our attention to is, what I thought a lot about was the potentially gendered lens that you bring to this sensitivity. And I'm not saying that a male leader is not sensitive, but that there might be, I think, something that you bring in terms of your experiences that have really shaped what you're doing. And you've been working in this very competitive, rapidly evolving media industry for 35 years. And I wonder if you could talk a little bit about your path to becoming a Canadian leader in this industry.
Sure. Well, I think, first of all, when you think about the kids industry, it is led by a lot of women. Women, the kids industry 20, 30 years ago really started to evolve outside of Disney content. And women gravitated to it and men gravitated away from it and went into more of the Hollywood style. So it did allow a great ground or feeding ground, if you will, or a nurturing environment for women. And we have to think about how to talk to children, which is something we tend to be a little bit more empathetic. I don't want to generalize, but women tend to do that, communicate in a little bit more of an empathetic way. And so I think the kids industry and females meshed well together. And because men tended to want to go into the more glamorous parts of the entertainment business, and I can say that because I started in this business with Barney, the dinosaur. And it was sometimes a challenge for us to get men
Yeah.
to come and work and sell Barney rather than the James Bond movie or the big feature film. That I worked with some amazing women who were great mentors for me and provided an environment that was very female-led. And so when I started off with Astral. I started off in finance and manufacturing very early on in my career. And then I moved into the entertainment business with Astral Media, a great Canadian company. And one of my first jobs was in finance there, but then moved into selling, as I mentioned, Barney Video at that time. VHS, so you know how old I am now. And then moved into DVD. We also sold plush, and I got into the publishing business. So I was able to really learn a lot about retail and consumers as well as the content, because the content was given to us. It was already made, and my job was to sell it. But part of that was to create live events with Barney, and that's where I really saw the connection between the character and the child, and therefore the parent, and the love that character gave to that child and vice versa really influenced me to stay in this business. It was much more than just selling toilet paper and toothpaste. Nothing wrong with that. But there was so much more of an emotional bond in what you did. And that's where you really realized the responsibility you had to bring that content into that family. And so I worked with Astral for a long time, and I worked with the Wiggles and VeggieTales and some other great IP. And then I moved over to Hit Entertainment, who ended up buying Barney, the company that owned Barney, and brought into North America Bob the Builder. And so my first job was to not only keep that Barney business going and the Wiggles, et cetera, but was to launch Bob the Builder in Canada. And we launched Bob the Builder on September, I think it was the 8th in Canada of 2001. And then September 11th happened 3 days later, and nobody went into retail. So I had all of these products. I was working with great partners at Hasbro and putting all of the Bob the Builder products at retail all over, got it on Treehouse TV, great marketing plan, thought everything was great. And then world events happened, much like we're going through now. And you have no choice but to ride that wave and see and adapt what you do and how you do it. And it ended up being a very successful thing because people love the idea of rebuilding. And so as parents emerged from September 11th, they wanted their children to watch safe, fun shows about building. Bob the Builder was perfect, and steer away from things that were more about fighting or wars or violence. And so that really helped us continue that launch. And I looked after Canada. I worked at home, one of the first remote jobs I think there was. I worked at home with no video, all phone.
Wow.
And then 2 years later, they gave me Latin America to look after, and I still stayed in Canada. And then a few years later, they gave me the US. And I didn't want to move from Toronto. My family's here. and moved to, so I commuted to New York City 4 days a week for
Wow.
4 years.
Wow.
And so I had great support from my husband, who, took my kids to hockey practice and to school and all of that stuff Monday to Thursday. So I always say I was Carrie Bradshaw Monday to Thursday, and hockey mom Friday to Sunday. And so I had a great dual life, if you will, that allowed me to experience everything. Then we sold that company to Mattel, and I literally and virtually came home and worked out of the kids' business for a few years at Staples. And they have a big marketing division, which I thought really interesting, working with brands like big automotive brands, beer brands, things that were not kids related. And then 3 years later, came back to the kids' business with a company I've always admired, Nelvana, a real staple within the kids' entertainment industry, and Chorus, and some people that I had worked with at the very beginning of my career when I sold them Barney for Treehouse TV. So it was a little bit of coming home, and it's
I
just
love
been a
all
great
the connect.
experience.
Yeah, it's just all the circularity, but also just like the impeccable timing. But I know it's not just timing and coincidence. These are all things you worked for, and we're going to throw this open to a Q&A and to the folks in our audience who might have questions. But I just have one more question for you. And when I think about this journey that you've taken, I'm also remembering that you were a part-time student at
Yes.
York, and I just wonder if you could talk a bit about that experience of doing a part-time degree and how maybe that led to the ways in which you've been able to pivot and adjust and understand how you can lead split and multiple lives and still thrive within them. So I'd be just curious to hear a bit about that.
Sure. I always knew that I really wanted to get my degree, but when I left high school, that just wasn't the time for various reasons, money as well, that just wasn't right for me, and that I needed to go to work. And so, but I always wanted to get it. My parents were immigrants. We came from the UK. They weren't, neither one of them had their degrees, but both very well read and learned people on their own. But I wanted that degree personally. And so as my career advanced, it was always, you have this job, but too bad you don't have the degree. So I realized I needed to go back. And so I did that, and I did that part-time. My husband at that time knew how important at that time it was for me to get my degree. I had a young child. My daughter's now 32. And so she was 4, I think, when I decided to go
All right, so
back.
you were a parent and part-time.
Parent and
Wow.
part-time. I'd taken a few courses before,
Wow.
but when I said this is it's what I want to do,
Wow.
small child, mortgage in Toronto, husband that worked full time, and I started one course a week, and it just seemed like I would never get to the end. And somebody gave me great advice. They say take it one course at a time, don't stop, and next thing you know, it'll be there. And that's exactly what happened. Took me 14 years, but that's exactly what happened. And and it was really important for me because I knew, I grew up in a generation where they told women you can't have it all. You can't be a mom and a career woman and a wife. You can't have it all. And I decided no, I could. I just had to define what all was for me. And so that's when I talk to young women, that's what I ask them to do. Define what all
Wow,
is
that's
for you,
amazing.
and then figure out how to get it and find people in your life that will help you get it. In my case, it was my family, my husband, and people that I worked with. A lot of my courses were paid for by my company. You took the course, I paid for it, you passed, your company paid you 50% back. So
Wow.
that was, I had a lot of people who really helped me when I had big exams to take the afternoon off to study. It takes a village. That isn't a good
Yeah.
expression. But yes, you just have to be very motivated and want to do it. And as a woman, you have to work twice as hard, I always say, to get to where a man gets to. And it's just the way of the world. And if you're a woman of color, that is exponentially harder. I was not, so I worked hard, but still recognized probably not as hard as what people, women of color, have to do. So I think as you think about what it is you want to do, you set your plan. Do not get sidetracked or feel nervous or scared about how big that plan is or how long that plan may take. It's one step at a time, and you can do it. And so I think that that has been sort of the success of my career as well as my education. Do work twice as hard as you need to work. Always, make sure the results are excellent. Ask for more and keep moving. And eventually, you realize that you have built a really successful career because you knew you just wanted to get to a certain place one step at a time.
I love this so much. And I want to pick up on something you said, but I also want to invite all of our amazing guests. If you have questions for Pam, please feel free to put them in the Q&A, and I would be delighted to bring these forward. And so actually, you know what? I'm going to hold my question and share with you some questions from our audience. Shefali asked, do you have any tips for students who are preparing to enter the workforce?
Yeah, I mean, I think that the amazing thing with students nowadays is there's such a wealth of knowledge out there for you to research where you want to work and what you want to do. I had to apply for jobs in the paper, in the classifieds. We didn't have the internet, and I couldn't research the company. If I didn't know what they did, I kind of had to go in an interview blind. And so what I would say to students is try and get somebody within the company that knows you. If you're looking to work for a specific company or in a specific industry, see if you can find somebody within that industry through your network of family, friends, LinkedIn, students, professors who can introduce you. Because if you get somebody within that company who can advocate for you or help you navigate how to get in, either through internship or through entry-level positions, that is very helpful. I know a lot of senior executives who will take coffee meetings with people. If one of their associates says, hey, I know a really amazing young student at York, can you, give them half an hour of your time? And so I think that the internet and the connections that we have are really important tools for a student to be able to determine where they want to work, rather than me, who I just had to fall into things and go. I mean, when I went to work for Astral, I had no idea what Astral did. And so you had to kind of think on your feet when they would ask you questions. Research is really important. Connections, get inside.
That's so great. And, I couldn't agree with Kelly more. You are an inspiration. And I want to just slip in. I think we have time for Des's question. It's such a good question. Pam, we're wondering, Des is wondering if you could please speak about Nelvana's Black Right Talent Incubator Program and its role in Nelvana's development of content for the next 50 years. And she wishes, Des, happy 50th.
Thank you. And I would love to speak about this incubator program. It's something I'm so proud of. Right after COVID, the Black Lives Matter movement rocked the world. And I think it made us all look at our organization and realize that the representation within our organization was not correctly balanced. Nelvana was great in that we had already created several shows led by Black young females, which was unheard of. In fact, we were told with one of our shows, Esme and Roy, that we worked with Sesame Street, that it wouldn't sell because it was led by a young Black lead character. We proved them wrong because that is not the case. But then when we look internally, my executive leadership team was female, primarily 75% female, all white. As I delved deeper into my organization, I realized that we had a lot of different ethnicities within the animation studio, but the Black community was not represented, or the Indigenous community was not represented correctly. So we put together a task force and really looked at what we could do to change that across our company, and have made great strides, of which the incubator program is one of them. Because what we found, it's not just a case of, oh, well, let's start hiring Black people. Let's start hiring Black people to write our stories and do our animation, if they haven't been given the opportunities at the onset to actually come into the industry and learn the trade and learn the craft. And so this incubator program allows people who have no experience to submit their ideas and be able to be mentored to the point where now they can go into the industry with experience. We, of course, will give them the opportunity within our studio, but they can go to other studios and gain that level of education and experience and mentorship that they have not had. And so that is something that we were able to create relatively quickly and are starting and are receiving submissions now and are really looking forward to identifying some individuals that will really grow with that kind of mentorship. It also offers us a template to now, the next one we want to do is for Indigenous writers. And so allowing them that. The next one could be female. The next one could be Asian. We will be able to take this template and create one of these incubator programs perhaps each year.
Thank you so much. I mean, what an inspiring note for us to close on. This half hour flew right by. We have learned so much from you. I want to thank everybody for joining us today. A huge special thank you to Pam for sharing your story and your experiences. Truly inspirational to all of the young future business leaders, female or otherwise, that are in the room with us. For those of you who are joining us as guests, please visit the LNPS website for information about the upcoming webinars and to register for our next webinar, which is Careers in Disaster and Emergency Management, which is taking place on December 1st from noon to 1. And you can find the registration link now in the chat, and more information about the Moving Forward webinars also on the website. Pam, it has been such a pleasure. You are an inspiration. We are so proud to be part of, a very small part of your journey, but we are cheering you on always here at York. Thank you. Thank you for being part of our community and for being with us here today.
Thank you. And thank you to York University. My degree is one of my most proudest possessions. So I thank you very much for that.
Bravo. And thank you again. Have a great afternoon, everyone.
Bye-bye.